and I remind all those present that their words and actions will be broadcast to a wider audience, and a certain conduct is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Should any person not wish to be recorded, I advise that they should leave the meeting room prior to any statement being made. Any defamatory statements made or not the position of the Council and remain an individual's opinion. Council accepts no responsibility for any defamatory statements, and all liability remains with the person making the remarks. Acknowledgement to country. I would like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would like to pay respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people here tonight. I'd like everyone to be upstanding for the Council prayer. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this Council. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of Thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Regional Council and Australia. Amen. Amen. Now, open the meeting, and item number 1 is apologies and leave of absence.
Councillor Conway requested a leave of absence for the first two board for this meeting and the next meeting. Councillor Maxwell is just an apology out of the city on personal business.
And Councillor Tickle is not.
She indicated she would be an apology.
Yeah, if she didn't make it. So we have those 3 apologies. We have a mover, Councillor Impey, seconded, Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? Against?
Can I just make a comment? Sorry, I thought Councillor Maxwell was attending a conference.
Yes, he is for Monday.
Oh, right.
The reason he's out of the city is it's not a conference day today.
Okay.
So he's actually travelling.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now, item number 2 is community consultation. We have one community person wishing to make representation to Council, and that is Mr James Treloar. So, Mr Treloar, if you would come to the lectern and state whether you've made any donations to any community, any councillor or staff member.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, councillors. No, I haven't contributed to any councillors in the room or to any staff members. Councillors, I would like to speak to you on item 6, which is the notice of motion, and just bring forth that this is a wonderful suggestion, but unfortunately it hasn't quite gone as far as it should. Tamworth into the future is going to need to look at further water storages. We have the proposal for Dungowan Dam extension at the moment, and that potentially is going to give the city a net gain of around about 17 gigalitres of water. It's a wonderful catchment because it's going to be a deep cell, which is a very economical way to store your water. It's going to pick up terrible Billy Creek, which doesn't happen at the moment in the current Dungowan system. But again, it's a dam being constructed at the headwaters of the river system. The only way this city is going to be able to cater for a population of in excess of 100,000 people is to capture the water sources, not just at the headwaters of the Peel and the Dungowan river systems. We need to look at the river systems of the Coburn, Gunniganoo Creek, Timbumuri Creek, Duncan's Creek, the many other tributaries that flow into those that all flow through past the city, and we get no benefit of that water source. What we should be looking at for our next stage of water storage is a potential diversion of part of the Peel River into the Keepit Dam. That will pick up all those river systems and give us the opportunity to potentially pump back from that system to the city. Keepit Dam, as was rightly mentioned in the notice of motion, was built as a flood mitigation scheme back in the 60s. Understanding this country did not have cotton in the 60s. That dam was not built for the purpose of cotton irrigation. It was built for the purpose of flood mitigation. It's not an enormously good storage system because it's quite shallow and it has significant evaporation. But if we were able to divert some of the waters that flow through Tamworth into that river system and potentially look at that as a storage for this city to be pumped back for our use in future years, it would be a wonderful advantage. It's a good opportunity to actually move forward and ask for that to be the next stage of investigation for a secure water storage for this city. In the interim, however, I would strongly recommend that the council look at the negotiations with, I'm not sure if it's NRA or State Water now, but for a second intake point to extract water out of the Peel River. And that intake point be below the Coburn River junction with the Peel. At the moment, the Coburn has been flowing since the 26th of January and we have had no benefit of that water in this city. It misses our intake point by about 500 metres now. If that was relocated or another one was established so you could extract that water as well, I think it would have enormous benefit to the city.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd.
Thank you very much for your time.
We move now to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Mover, Councillor Inglis and Councillor Rodder. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
Mr Acting Mayor, just to point out on the last page, it's got Councillor Murray as the chairperson tonight, so that'll just need to be changed. Because you are the chairperson.
Councillor Inglis. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make a comment? All those in favour? Against? Carried. Move now to item 4, disclosures of interest. Any councillor has a disclosure of interest that they wish to put forward? Councillor Rodder.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Item 12.1, in closed council, the proposal to close Lock Lane would be considered by my department, but as I have nothing to do with the closing of roads and things like that, I'll remain in the chamber and participate in discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Rodder. Now we'll move now to item 5, which is the mayoral minute, and being no mayoral minute moves us on now to item 6, which is the notice of motion. 6.1, the request for New South Wales Government to support to consider a pump site from Peel River to Cooper Dam to enhance Tamworth North West water supply. This by Councillor Rodder. Do you wish to move that?
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Notice of motion 6.1, if I had a seconder, I'd speak.
Seconded, Councillor Impey.
Thank you, Councillor Impey. Just briefly, most of the information is there. The yellow highlighted is basically an update to the original notice of motion, purely to basically say investigate the feasibility of a pipeline. I'm certainly happy, I was pleased to hear what the speaker in public consultation mentioned about the future of the proposal to divert water into Keepit. But in relation to my notice tonight, certainly is just a simple request that the New South Wales Government investigate the feasibility of a pump site and pipeline infrastructure to collect a percentage of good river flows during good rain events from the Peel River and pump it into Keepit Dam. Ultimately, I would like to see consideration for a pipeline from Keepit Dam to Tamworth, but that is not part of my recommendation tonight. Naturally, the feasibility of such a plan would include any impacts on the environment, flora and fauna, and impacts on stakeholders here and elsewhere. It would also consider impacts on the water sharing plans and the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. I understand the importance of environmental flows and have no desire to extract more out of a struggling river system than necessary, but during good rain events and obviously nothing during poor seasonal times. My proposal is to enhance an existing state-owned storage during times of favourable rain events when the Peel River is swollen at the Carroll Gap Bridge, and ultimately to enhance our region's current water storage options. This will be particularly important as our region grows and indeed faces more extreme dry weather events and drought events. And as I said, this will increase the suite of water supply options our community needs as it grows into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Rodder.
Through you, Chair. Can I just clarify, Councillor Rodder? So you've actually moved the yellow highlighted motion,
Yes.
and Councillor Impey, you're clear that that's what you seconded, not the original motion? Thank you.
Did you just put that?
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor Inglis.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Yeah, I won't be voting for the notice of motion tonight, and whenever I do these things, I always give my reasons. Basically, I believe, even though it's just been changed, the recommendation seeking funding, because that's what the original notice of motion said, is not in the best interest of Tamworth. The proposal makes no reference to the construction of a pipeline from Keepit Dam to Kalala Treatment Plant. Without this pipeline, the proposal makes zero contribution to the security and reliability of Tamworth's water supply. It seems the motion before us has more to do with securing water supplies for the communities of the Northwest. In principle, a worthy cause indeed, but not our place, at least without extensive consultation with all the communities impacted. I also believe the motion shows a lack of understanding of the infrastructure dynamics pertaining to moving large volumes of water over short periods. For example, as we already know, the new Dungowan pipeline is projected to be 900 millimetres in diameter, and that will only deliver a maximum of 71 megalitres of water per day. To make any practical impact on storage levels in Keepit Dam, you will need to shift vastly more water than that per day. Because it is a stream flow, you will have very limited time. The motion before us is basically a water harvesting strategy, a strategy that in principle I support. We should be harvesting in the Peel in Tamworth, located a short distance from the Kalala Treatment Plant, by constructing weirs to capture high flows sourced from Duncans Creek, Dungowan Creek, Gunniganu Creek and the Coburn River. This is doable and at a far lesser capital cost and most importantly significantly decreased recurrent operational costs than capture at Carroll's Gap. If my councillor colleague presents a notice of motion to examine the feasibility and funding of harvesting water in the Tamworth environs of the Peel River, he will have my absolute support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Anyone else wishing to make a comment? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I responded initially to the initial notice of motion. I think Councillor Rodder's notice of motion is excellent and the intent is excellent, but it certainly didn't go far enough. It goes further now. And should this eventuate, it will certainly capture water downstream, and it may extend water availability for irrigation and to Walgett, and I think it's noble to push for this. However, without a further pipeline from Keepit to Tamworth, it won't increase Tamworth's water sustainability. And with the amendment to your motion, that's now factored in. At this time, a further storage dam in a catchment above Tamworth with sound management has the potential to do this. But we will need to keep in focus, our focus on the new Dungowan Dam, to keep funding on the new Dungowan Dam, and we need to keep the momentum on this dam. We need to negotiate the best outcome for our deserving, thriving, and yet needy water regional city. Water needy regional city. I think it's untimely to throw in another thing right now. I agree that the new Dungowan Dam has got so much in the air that we don't know. We don't know the case, we don't know who will manage the dam, we don't know who's going to manage the pipeline, we don't really know what will become part of Tamworth. And however, for water sustainability for Tamworth, right now, I think we need to keep our focus there. I absolutely agree that, and as our speaker highlighted, and as Councillor Inglis highlighted, we've just got to capture the capturing is happening in the wrong place, and so much of the water that we could capture and could use for Tamworth just flies past, and there's no way that we can legally or adequately or practically capture this water. And there needs to be a realistic examination of what Tamworth's water situation really is. We had a presentation just before this meeting that talked about if Tamworth intends to grow. Every regional city intends to grow. If you don't go forward, you go backwards. We have no alternative, and we need a really sound water supply, and looking at the Coburn and the potential for a catchment below that is where our future lies. We've always highlighted the viability of pumping water from Keepit back up to Tamworth. It rated in, I think, our first 4, and it's always been in our sights. So, or why it's noble to factor in downstream, we need to focus on our own city, and so thank you for adding that extra section to the notice of motion. However, I can't support the notice of motion now because I think it's untimely. We really do need to ensure that we get a catchment above Tamworth. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any further comment on the notice of motion? Councillor Remke.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Well, I support the notice of motion on the basis that, if anything else, it started a conversation. And a conversation is always the first part of what could be decision making further down the track. And as we do know, we live in an inland city with a water requirement that seems to have exceeded what capacity we have to store and save water over the last 3 or 4 years. Otherwise, the water levels wouldn't have been reduced to a certain level that they have. I think the lowest figure was something like 13.9%, I think, over the period of time in the last couple of years. The CSIRO talk a lot about how the climate is changing, and there is a reference in that notice of motion that during high flow times, some of that water should be preserved and i.e. Somehow pumped in to keep it down for future use, and what that future use might be. Hopefully there may be some future use for the Tamworth City in that. I think the high rainfall events, sadly, will become a less regular or an irregular normality in the future. We've been told by scientists that dry periods and very high rainfall periods will be more the norm in the future, rather than good old-fashioned rainfall events over days. And if that is the case, we might see large flows on very irregular occurrences. And if we can start planning for that through a start of a conversation tonight, I think that's a wise step in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Remke. Any further comment? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Look, the idea of doing that has been considered. It was one of our, not taking water out of the river and putting it into Keepit, but actually taking water out of Keepit through a pipeline and back to Tamworth. It was one of 4 considerations some time ago when we did quite a bit of consultation with those who know more than I do about it anyway. And it wasn't a chosen model. At the time, I did look at Keepit Dam, and whilst the speaker today spoke about it being a flood mitigation dam, it wasn't very long after that dam was constructed that it became an opportunity for the government to try and grow industry in the Namoi Valley. And they issued licences to quite a lot of people in the Namoi Valley. They were 400-acre licences. Now those licences weren't really taken up that well, or those that were taken up weren't really utilised. They then reissued another lot of 400-acre licences. A similar thing applied, and again for a third time they issued another lot of 400-acre licences. Sometime into the future from then, those licences were converted to volumetric licences. Now I don't know where this figure, how they came to this figure, but those licences became 978 megalitre licences. That's to my knowledge. So at that point in time, we started to see the cotton industry grow. We had a couple of yanks come out and really started that happening around Weewaw and in that valley. And of course, as that grew and took off, there was a realisation that that all of the water in Keepit Dam had been allocated. So there's nothing left other than the water that was there for Walgett. There was some water for the township of Walgett. Very little environmental water back in those days, wasn't really a consideration. So for us to do anything back then would have been near on impossible. To do what we're talking about here, and that is to harvest water out of the Peel near the Carroll Gap and punch it into Keepit, is problematic. Very problematic. The regulations around doing all of that are very comprehensive, they're very complex, and it would take years for us to get anywhere with that. It just probably wouldn't happen because in the short term or even the medium term, because the Murray-Darling plan doesn't allow for harvesting that water the way we're talking about it. I'm not knocking the idea, but they're the problems we would face. And I think that that's probably one of the reasons, apart from the cost of it, that we probably should push that aside for the time being. But the main reason is, Mr Acting Mayor, is that this council needs to get behind, and well and truly get behind, the push for that Dungowan upgrade. There is a pipeline to be built from Dungowan Dam to Tamworth, which has to be replaced. And if we don't push for that dam to be built and that pipeline to be replaced, then we will end up having to, and if it doesn't go ahead because we don't push hard enough, then we would have to hold our heads up and say, well, hang on, we're responsible for losing this. And I'll say any council that could, that fought against that proposal up there would have to front the community and say, listen, I'll probably bear some of the responsibility for losing that dam. We need to be at 100% behind getting that dam up and running, 100% behind getting that water supply to give Tamworth a better water security into the future. Yes, I admit we don't know how much we're going to get out of it. I don't know what the rules and regulations are going to be around the way that water is distributed. But one thing I do know is there's $500 million sitting there, or $480 million sitting there to build a dam, to build us a new pipeline, money that we would have had to find ourselves, and it will give us some water. And I think that we need to keep our focus on that. And whilst I think what you're talking about is probably in the future something that we need to further investigate, now is not the time to do it. And it's certainly not the time to go to government and say, can we get some more money to try this? Well, they're pushing so hard to try and get that up and running. If we start putting hurdles in the way in terms of asking for more money for other studies, then we are actually putting ourselves in a position where we could potentially find ourselves missing out on that wonderful opportunity up there. So I would say that, Mr Acting Mayor, that we have to 100% put all of our energy behind Dungowan Dam and the increase there, not put anything on the table in front of the government for the time being. Once that's done, I think another intake,
presentation to a close.
another intake, and also the words from Councillor Inglis about capturing some of the water closer to Tamworth would be the way to go. But if we go pushing down this road, I think we'd probably put ourselves in a position where we might find ourselves wanting in the future.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. I might ask the Director for Water to make some comment. Would you be able to make some comment?
I think he does.
Acting Mayor, I don't want to make too many comments. I think that from a technical point of view, without a pipeline from Keepit Dam to Tamworth, the proposal is won't improve the security of Tamworth's water supply. So as far as that goes, if my role is to look at the improving the water security of Tamworth, then I don't see that this option without a pipeline, it's not going to do that. So that would be a concern of mine. I do, from a technical perspective, I do think that the quantity and the volume of the water that we're talking about shifting is significant, and that's going to cost a lot of money to move water, a lot of water across a short distance in a short period of time is going to cost a lot of money. So I question. I mean, I don't know whether it'll be $480 million. That's true, but it won't. It'll be expensive. It seems that all infrastructure of the size that we're talking about is very expensive nowadays anyway. But it will be expensive. And yes, I do accept Councillor Webb's suggestion that if this project, the Dungowan Dam project, replaces the Dungowan pipeline, that'd be fantastic, because if that doesn't do it, then council has to do it, and that's a significant cost to us.
Thanks, Mr Logan. I'll just make a brief comment, and I assume you would like to close the debate, Councillor Rodder. I have the concerns that if we muddy the water and push for this option, these options have, as was previously noted, have been reviewed by a number of our consultants over the period of time that we've looked at the augmentation of Tamworth water supply. And back when I was chairing the Chaffey Dam reference panel, that option was looked at to divert water from the Peel River into Keepit. And it required huge volumes over a short pace of time, but it was a 7-kilometre channel that was looked at to harvest it north of the Carroll Gap, 7 kilometres north, and then into the river. But the water was over allocated, and at the time it wasn't economically feasible. Having said that, I think it is one of our one of our 4 viable options. But it is, as other councillors said, imperative that we as a community, as a council, say leadership and push for the Dungowan Dam, because yes, it is new water and it is the secure of Tamworth supply. So with that, I'll allow Councillor Rodder to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Look, I would be 100% happy if I was 100% confident that a new Dungowan Dam would in fact provide the security, the water security that we need now and into the future. You know, it wasn't very long ago, 4 years ago, that the government of the day and representatives were saying that the augmented Chaffey Dam at 100 gigalitres would be securing Tamworth's water future. And now they're saying a 22.5 gigalitre dam at $480 million will secure Tamworth's longer term future. And that's obviously going on the history of Chaffey Dam. That couldn't do it. Why would a dam virtually less than a quarter of the capacity of Chaffey Dam do that? And that's simply the reality. My notice of motion, obviously attempted to address the fact that since January to when the rain started to the end of June this year, more than 62 gigalitres of water was measured at the Carroll Gap Bridge as it left the Peel into the Namoi. And obviously, since then, July, August, September, October, to the middle of November, there would have been a lot more. And I'm sure that we'll see at the end of the next Peel Valley Water Balance Report, we'll see even a bigger figure that has left and obviously hasn't been able to be utilised by the Tamworth community. And I also think of the figure 12.9% that we were down to in Chaffey and level 5 restrictions for a year, and hence the reason why I think we have to think outside the square. And this is why I thought, and I agree 100% with Councillor Impey, that this starts a conversation, and this is what it does. It starts a conversation, and it's been indicated that it's one of 4 options that we could have adopted or pushed for. I think it's not a bad option. There's already a big storage there, underutilised. It's at 26%, keep it, and obviously has the capacity to take more water. Imagine if we were able to collect some of that 62 gigalitres up to the end of June this year. And that's why I moved this notice of motion, purely to look at alternatives. It may not have been perfect, but nor often plans aren't perfect at the start. It's what you get at the end. And I don't think there's any assurance that a 22.5 gigalitre new Dungowan Dam is going to secure Tamworth's water future, particularly if we are to grow to 100,000 people in the next 20 years. How are we going to supply that sort of amount of water to that many people without looking at alternatives? And that's why I moved this motion. And I'm disappointed that it's obviously opposed by a majority, but it's I'm sure that in the future, as you said, hopefully we will look at it and again and maybe it'll be a better plan than what even my plan was. But
Thank you, Councillor Rodder. We'll now put the notice of motion, 6.1. All those in favour? Against? Its motion is lost. We'll now move on to item 7, which is reports to the Growth and Council. Environment and planning, we haven't got any environmental planning reports, which now moves on to item 8, which is infrastructure and services. We have item 8.1, CSIRO proposal for trial wastewater treatment system. Move Councillor Rodder, seconded Councillor Webb. Councillor Rodder, would you like to speak to?
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. So I'll just get past the disappointment of the last, but this is fantastic. I've always been extremely supportive of recycling water, and I think it's the future. And I support this recommendation. I think it's extremely exciting to partner with a reputable organisation such as the CSIRO, and I think we should be proud that they've selected our region to trial this technology. Obviously, it comes at a cost, but I believe our CSIRO scientists are second to none, and I'm sure that we know we've got waterways, and I'm sure that this is part of the answer to dealing with our waterways and our current recycled water or wastewater issue. Obviously dealing with the salt will be a challenge. I have always thought that could be easily dealt with by just putting it on a train carriage and sending it down to the ocean and throwing it in there. But I'm sure it's a challenge, but I'm sure that it's one we can overcome, and I commend the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Rodder. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Councillor Wilson.
Mr Acting Mayor, the CSIRO is one of the finest Australian research institutes, and in fact one of the finest in the world, and this is a perfect fit for us. It actually is where we're at, this reverse osmosis, and the potential will really be a good fit for our reuse farm. And one of the things we do in Australia is not back our research and our research groups, and we need to back this. There's also a potential for grant funding, and so I'm quite excited about it. I think it's great to be part of this. It also could create opportunities in our push for University Tamworth and create embryonic research potential. So it fits us in all ways, and it's great to see this here.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Inglis.
Oh, thanks, Mr Mayor. Just it's a great idea and 100% behind it, but just intellectual curiosity. Why is two sites? Why is the two sites ratio? I tried to look up the attachment, but whether it's the way it's been scanned, but I can't even read the numbers. So I'm just curious why the small difference between two sites versus one site.
Chair, Councillor Inglis, I think the majority of the cost is to get the unit here. So once it's here, there isn't even much cost involved in moving it around. So it's like a site establishment cost is the greatest part of the fee, so that would explain it. Technically, they're interested in the quality of the raw water or the effluent that's being discharged from not just our effluent treatment plant, but also if they can intercept that before it gets into the sewer and treat that to a high quality, which would be great news for us if they could do that. So that's why they want to have a look at an industrial site as well.
Thanks. Any further comment, Councillor Embry?
And that's a really nice segue into the point I wanted to make. I think it's a wonderful idea to provide us with some science behind the opportunity to allow some treated water to be reticulated into a dual system for the the Tamworth Global Gateway Park, because it will attract businesses. We have a new Global Gateway Park that is just about to come online, and I think it's a very, very strong position of Tamworth to be in, to be able to attract as many businesses into that as we possibly can. And I firmly believe that the work that CSIRO will do in partnership with our council and our very well-trained and knowledgeable staff within council will be a good thing for the growth of our city.
Thank you, Councillor Embry. Any further comment? Being no further comment, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 8.2, the Tamworth Regional Local Traffic Committee meeting. For the mover, Councillor Inglis, Councillor Impey. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No thanks, Mr Acting.
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? I now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 8.3, the Australian Equine and Livestock Event Centre, solar photovoltaic options. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Webb. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion? Anyone speaking against the motion? I'll now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 8.4, which is the regular update on the drought response and water sustainability. Move to Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Impey. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just a question, Mr Mayor. It's a comprehensive report, good report, always well written and inclusive. I'm just interested to know whether there's been an increase in the request for evaporative cooler testing, and also whether there's any indication of people changing from evaporative cooling systems to reverse cycle or other forms of energy to cool their houses, because there has been a lot of talk about if droughts got worse, then maybe evaporative coolers would not be on the menu to be used. So I'm interested to know whether there's any indication anywhere that there's a change, and whether perhaps we should put out incentives for people to move away from evaporative cooling.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Councillor Inglis.
I'd like the question answered.
Mr Acting Mayor, just on the evaporative coolers, I notice it's our largest rebate, but we don't have any estimates of savings. It'd be really nice if we did, because my wife wants to keep my evaporative cooler on all night. So if I can get some numbers in there, I can show her the savings we can make on our largest rebate, convince her that we don't need to have it on all night, Mr Acting Mayor.
Mr Mayor, that's
Thank you,
a pecuniary interest, I think.
I can make a comment.
Councillor Wilson had a question.
Sorry, so I'll answer both, I think. Can I take Councillor Inglis first?
As well.
Yeah, they've been very popular, but the reason why we're not offering any estimates of how much water is going to be saved is because the service might reveal there's nothing wrong with the evaporative air conditioner, in which case you're not saving any water as a result of the rebate that we have that we've paid. So it's only those where the rebate has encouraged the homeowner to have the evaporative cooler checked, and by doing that they've actually found something that's wrong with the cooler that's leading to it using more water when it's operating. We were actually saving money from those. And then Councillor Wilson, we don't have any information about whether anyone's moving towards getting rid of evaporative air conditioners and replacing with a reverse cycle. It's interesting, Mr Chair, that we're presently looking at an expression of interest to see if there would be anyone, consultants or companies out there that might be interested in undertaking some investigation to see how much water evaporative air conditioners do use in Tamworth, because it is a huge issue, as councillors would be aware, a huge issue for us using evaporative air conditioners when it's hot. They use a lot of water, and we don't really know how much water they use. So the idea of the expression of interest is to see if there's anyone who would be prepared to put measuring devices, meters on individual evaporative air conditioners, and then we might be able to start gathering some information about how much they actually use relative to heat and size and how old they are, etc. We haven't completed that expression of interest. We haven't put that out yet, and we'll come back to council. No doubt there'll be a cost to come back to council to see whether council wants to pursue that in the fullness of time.
Thank you, Mr Logan. Councillor Webb.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair, Acting Mayor. I've had a few places with evaporative systems. They do use a lot of water, and I've had to replace a few in town, not through this program, but obviously it's very easy to work out how much water goes through them. You just need to put a a small device in the feed line on the roof of the evaporative cooler. So I don't know that we need to go and do too much other than just engage a plumber to go and do half a dozen and then get a reading each month or each every couple of weeks. It would take very little to get that done and very little cost, and you could report back to us pretty quickly, I would suggest.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Any further comment? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Just on that, the problem with that is that there's all sorts of evaporative cooler systems and different brands, and obviously some use more water than others. And just in relation to Councillor Inglis's issue, we've got evaporative cooler up the top end where our bedrooms are. It's on a thermostat, and I set it to about 25 degrees, which seems pretty high. But it only kicks in, sparingly during the night. It doesn't then empty all its water out. It only does that obviously when it's so many hours of idle use. So I've got quite an efficient unit. So I don't think it wouldn't be a one-size-fit-all with those with evaporative coolers. Some are efficient, some are inefficient, and it depends, whether people have had them maintained or whether they've got a thermostat, as I do. I've been trying to tell my mum, just put it on a certain temperature and just leave it at that. But it's very hot, turn it on. Oh, it's cold, turn it off, and she'd have it flat out all day. But I think that it's certainly a very inefficient way of using that because you're then having to soak the pads again. But I think that, our system, I'm not going to tell you what brand it is or anything like that, but I think the system we've got is quite an efficient brand, and I just don't know if that would deliver, meters would deliver the outcome about how much water they're using that we might like it to.
Thank you, Councillor Otter. No further comment? No put to motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. We now move on to item 8.5, granting the easement of essential energy for underground power at Killala Water Treatment Plant.
Move it.
Moved Councillor Webb, seconded Councillor Rodder. Councillor Webb, would you like to speak?
No, Mr Mayor, very straightforward.
Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Anyone wish to make comment? I will now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to section 9, Governance and Strategy and Finance, 9.1. Councillor Inglis. Seconded, Councillor Impey. Councillor Inglis, would you like to make comment?
Just a couple of observations, Mr Mayor. I've moved it, we'll vote for it, but it's something that I think staff into the future will need to keep a close eye on, particularly after the next election for new councillors, and it's mainly to do with the policy we've adopted is in accordance with the New South Wales government guidelines. But I think there's a fundamental flaw in those guidelines, and maybe a couple of years of it, we'll see how it goes. And that's around that 70-20-10 sort of principle. For me, that's just an absolute distortion of reality. For one to believe that 70% of professional development for a 21st century councillor is going to come from experience learning is equivalent to believing that climate change is a conspiracy theory. A 21st century councillor is going to need a minimum of 50%, not 10% of structured learning, and but our policy is in accordance with the guidelines. I make that point, but as I say, and in particular, Mr Mayor, for first-time councillors, structured learning is going to be fundamental for first-time councillors, subject to their personal backgrounds, to get their head around the system of local government and everything that it entails. I think the recent suspension of Central Coast Council highlights the sort of point here about being a councillor in the 21st century. That is a mega council, but still there was obviously clearly a lack of understanding financial management principles and the knowledge around that. And my final comment, Mr Mayor, will be going forward, it'll be really important for the council to ensure that it does individualised professional development plans for councillors. I've been doing a bit of work in that space, and a lot of councils are sort of taking the cookie cutter approach. Hook up to some programs, get someone in, and every councillor's got to do it. And always there's councillors that just don't need to do certain things. So that individualised nature of the PD plan is something that's really important, and councillors should remember that when they sit down to do their plan. Do the learning around your interests and what you're interested in, and don't let the cookie cutter approach grab you.
Thank you, councillor Angus. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? There being no comment, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 9.2, Tamworth Regional Council Annual Report. Moved councillor Inglis, seconded councillor Impey. Councillor Inglis, would you like to make comment?
Just a brief one, Mr Mayor. The staff have done a good job. Congratulations. The annual report, I don't think, is on the bestseller list of every community member, but it is an important document, particularly around accountability. I do like some of the marketing in it, in the sense of optimism and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, I'm normally an optimistic person, but I do believe that the next 12 months of local government, from a financial perspective, as with all councils, not just us, is going to be far tougher than the current financial period that we're reporting on, because we'll have a full 12 months of COVID, and we'll need to stay very mindful of it. But a good job by the staff.
Thank you, councillor. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Anyone wish to make comment? Councillor Wilson.
It's been an interesting year, hasn't it? We've started off with absolute optimism, with launching our blueprint and so many other plans we had in mind, and then we basically came a cropper. And the optimism was despite a drought. And so if I highlighted some of the things that I think we've achieved this year that fit in with the annual plan, are the University Tamworth push and how far we've got with that. Essentially the launch of Blueprint happened this year in the Tamworth Global Park. We've moved along so far in that. Dungown Dam announcement, and I know we've still got to, we're holding our breath in many ways and working strategies for that to ensure that it serves us as well as we can. But nevertheless, it's part of our plan and we've achieved it. What we've achieved in the sporting area will back us up in so many ways in the university and us going forward. One of the things I think that's throughout the whole business plan, that annual report that's come out well, is how well we communicate with our community now. We didn't do that very well at all, and GM will remember every time we have a review it was, hey, we need to get this right, we need to get this right. But the way we communicate with our community now is amazing. And I think one of the highlights actually is how we've come out of a raging drought and dropped into a raging pandemic. Who would envisage that in a year? And yet the business community, the residents, our community, and the council have worked together to achieve so much, and they've actually done it in good spirit, because it's been lousy. But how this has all been achieved throughout this time, and what is startling is, and I think I've said this before, when you look back in 1919, they were facing pandemic and they were facing raging drought, and they got through that optimistically. And I just think it's an absolute credit to the staff and how they've taken on board and factored in so much in terms of community, encouraging, working with the community, getting things right without drought, and still working through our program, and perhaps councillors being realistic about where we're at. And what overrides all of this, in fact, is the relationship between council, between councillors as representatives of people through the business community and through the whole community. And I don't think we can fault us. We're not perfect, but there's a really good sync there. And so, this annual report, I think, leaves us in really good stead, because we've done the hard yards and we've got great optimistic plans. I'm really looking forward to the Tamworth Global Park getting a kick on, and the university. Nothing will be easy, but we'll make it work. So congratulations.
Thank you, councillor Wilson. Anyone wishing to make further comment? Councillor Webb.
Yeah, just a quick comment, Mr Mayor, and I just support what Councillor Wilson said, but also support what Councillor Inglis said, and that is, I think next year will be a lot tougher year than what may be being forecast. But in terms of what Councillor Wilson said, I think we're probably very fortunate in a way. We've had a stable environment in this council for a number of years now, and with that stability, we've had a business community that's built itself in a stable environment. It's a business community, even though we've gone through drought, that's built up a resilience and been able to look forward and say, well, the stability around the environment we're doing our business in, even though things are tough financially, will give us the opportunity to get out of the situation that we're in now. This is in drought, and of course COVID hit us and the same thing again. But Tamworth in particular, I think's done exceptionally well. And if you go out into the business community now and you talk to different people, which we all do, it's surprising just how busy a lot of the sectors in our community are. Don't get me wrong, there are sectors out there that are doing it pretty tough, and a lot of that's out of our control completely. But the business community and the community in general out there aren't doing too bad. But I think as the stimuluses that the federal government and the states are putting in place or have put in place, as they wax and wane over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll probably see some real challenges. But I do believe that our community, because of stability here, stability within in the city itself and the region, I think we'll come out of it a lot better than some other areas. And I think there's a lot of people to be thanked for that. That stability means a lot to a lot of people.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Any further? Councillor Remby.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. I'm a bit of an optimist. I like to think positively towards the future, and I think COVID has hit some sections of our community more than others. I think the drought has created some impact, but talking to one of my Year 12 students from this year today, he's doing some work out with the grains, and the storages are filling up fast. In fact, we might not have enough storage across the state, which is a really nice outlook for the farmers and the farming sector, and we will see some subtle spin-offs from that over the next 12 months and going forward, and touch all the wood I possibly can here, because I think if we get this La Nina that we all talk about, and we do see an increase in our catchment, Chaffey particularly, we could be in for a bit of a mini boom, maybe not in the next 12 months, but the 12 months after. And like some of my fellow councillors, I've been talking to a lot of people in the construction industry over the last few weeks, and they're flat out. And I know some stimulus packages have helped with that, but if people weren't feeling good about the city they live in and the region they live in, they still wouldn't be spending money. So I think we're looking quite optimistic.
Thank you, Councillor Remby. Any further comment? Being no further comment, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 9.3, minutes from the Audit Risk Committee, Improvement Committee. Councillor Inglis and Councillor Remby. Councillor Inglis, would you like to comment?
Mr Mayor, Acting Mayor, just to bring to Councillor's attention there the reinstatement of the full-time internal position of internal auditor. We used to have that at basically about the beginning of our current term, and we've gone back to that, so just for you to be mindful of that.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? No comment, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move now to item 9.4, Tamworth Regional Council Consolidated Financial Report for the period ended June 30, 20. Councillor Inglis and Councillor Rodder.
Yes.
Councillor Inglis, would you like to comment?
It is the most exciting report of the evening, Mr Mayor, so worthy of comment, the old financial accounts, but we had a presentation, as you know, the other night, and that's a great way to do it because it enables you to ask, one-on-one questions and all the rest of it. Just two comments, Mr Mayor. The building and the infrastructure renewals ratio just astonishes me that works in progress, the expenditure therein is not allowed to be taken account of in the determination of that ratio. That is fundamentally ridiculous. And and for the first time ever, obviously local government in the 21st century, unexpended grant funds. There's no opening balance, there is no net movements, but there is a closing balance. How does one do that? Amazing.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? No further comment. I will now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We move now to 9.5, Council's investment for October 2020. Moved Councillor Webb, seconded to Councillor Impey. Councillor Webb, would you like to comment?
No, Mr Mayor, it's pretty.
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? No one wishing to make comment, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Move now to item 9.6, 2020-21 quarterly budget review statements. Is it the 30th of September? Moved Councillor Inglis, seconded Councillor Wilson. Councillor Inglis, would you like to make comment?
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Just a couple of observations. Our unrestricted cash position, just picking up on my earlier comments there, that I think the next 12 months is that I'm a little bit more pessimistic, and that's in the context of that is around council's finances, as for many councils in New South Wales. But our unrestricted cash position, I don't think, I can't remember the last time we were below our minimum, if ever.
Yeah, that's something.
Probably first time since you've been here, yeah. One can't help but notice that. And in that context, of course, I'm not saying I hear the sounds of a siren, but I do hear the dulcet tones of a ringing bell. We do need to closely examine some short-term temporary measures in relation to general fund I'm talking about, to increase that unrestricted cash position, and I do know the staff are thinking that way, but just to make an observation as a councillor, that's an important one, because that's fundamentally about our financial sustainability. But the next 12 months is going to be very interesting, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Councillor Wilson.
Just a couple of general comments, Mr Acting Mayor. The report contains some cautionary warnings, I think, which we're all pretty aware of. The drought and the pandemic have had a major impact on our budget incomes, that's pretty obvious. But it does reinforce the need for the term prudent financial management through both good times and through challenging times. It's absolutely critical. And our current situation makes that obvious once again. It also brings in the focus to be mindful of long-term non-self-funding projects, but not to the exclusion of them. We have to keep interesting things ticking over, but we need to be prudent.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other councillor wishing to make comment? Further comment? Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. We now move on to item 9.8, Tamworth Regional Aviation Strategic Development Working Group. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Impey. Councillor Wilson, would you like to speak to the motion?
I think you jumped to
Did I? Well, we'll reverse.
9.7, so I missed that
I
one.
thought I got that one. Okay. 9.7, sorry, Councillor Wilson. Annual Operation Plan Budget Variation Report for October. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilson. And a seconder?
Probably what
Councillor Impey again. Councillor Wilson, would you like to make comment? Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now we'll move on to item 9.8, Tamworth Regional Aviation Strategic Development Working Group, minutes 27th of October. Councillor Wilson again, would you like to move that?
Yes.
And second, Councillor Rodder. Councillor Wilson, would you like to make comment?
I wanted to highlight the idea, pleasure that there's general aviation is taking a fairly significant introduction to our aviation scene. It's not huge, but it's important, and it's good to see that it's containing space, and we're making head movement there.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. I think it was a good set of minutes. They report something that is positive at the airport. There's not a lot positive at the airport at the moment, but I think probably next year we'll step into some positive territory. But I think there's going to be some great opportunities there in general aviation moving into the future, and it might mean that we have to dig deep to get some of those opportunities that are starting to emerge from out of the Sydney Basin up into our area. And if you listen to Bernard Salt, who's a very well-renowned demographer, he's starting to talk about some of the biggest cities shrinking, why they're going to shrink. And he's very well respected in his opinion. And that'll be because of what we've seen through COVID. We've seen so much of this stuff that's done on the computers, the Microsoft Teams, Zoom, all that sort of stuff has allowed people to get an understanding they can move out of the bigger cities, and some of those bigger businessmen have got aeroplanes, and we need to be in a position to make sure that we can attract those people into our region, because we've got a fantastic area for those people to come and live with all of the lifestyle components that have built up here over the years. So I think there's a lot of good news coming to our airport in terms of general aviation over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thank you, Councillor Burt. Any other councillor wishing to make comment? Councillor Impey.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Yeah, I'm personally very excited about general aviation. I mean, I don't fly or anything, but I do agree with what Councillor Webb said, that people who have a passion for flying will need to find a home, and Tamworth is a good home for them, and we'd like to have our open doormat there for them. And I'd really like to see general aviation as a part of the planning moving forward with our airport, and I'd really like to see it take off.
Councillor Impey. Any further comment? Being no further comment, I now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Now we move on to item section 10, Community Services, 10.1, which is the Tamworth Regional Inclusive Cultural Advisory Committee minutes, 18th of June 2020. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Impey, seconded. Councillor Wilson, would you like to make a comment?
I'll just briefly. This is a wonderful eclectic advisory group, drawn from the most interesting people in the community, and I'm really looking forward to working with them. Might I say that COVID has certainly slowed us down. However, the minutes do say that we're having a working group with the next meeting, which will be on Thursday. But because we wanted to get the best outcome from the opportunity to have a sound working group, working group really together, and we've decided to get a facilitator in and to really capture all the ideas and to get the very best to start the new year with. So there is a change there to what was projected to be happening. However, it's a group that is well needed in the community and will fit in well with TRACAC, that's chaired by Councillor Inglis. But it's so encouraging to see so many sections of our community, whether they be from different cultural groups, and we know we've got about 81 or 2 different cultural groups in Tamworth now, to groups that have special needs, whether they be ASPI or whether they be young or old or got disability of somewhere. They're all, the idea of this is to be inclusive, not just culturally inclusive, but totally inclusive. So we hope that this will really contribute, like many other areas do, to our community.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Being no comment, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. We move now to item 10.2, that is Stay Regional Shop Tamworth Regional Gift Card. Move it, Councillor Inglis, seconded Councillor Impey. Councillor Inglis.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Yeah, look, it's a good initiative. It's been very successful in a number of other places. I would ask councillors an indulgence just to do a slight amendment to the recommendation. I think the governance arrangements around it are important, And I'd just like to add the words that council's procurement practices apply to council's financial contribution, just to provide that accountability over the 3 years around our contribution. I did have a chat with the General Manager prior to coming into the meeting, and he might like to add comment to that.
Councillor Inglis, I did give this some additional thought after our conversation. I absolutely agree with you about the governance. I guess I thought about just including that procurement practice, and I don't think it probably goes far enough. I had thought about just in .1 that we would actually change that to read, provide $20,000 plus GST for the 3-year project to be used for the purpose of licensing the platform and the purchase of the cards and marketing collateral in accordance with council's procurement process.
Beautiful.
I can provide that to you. So essentially what I'm saying, Councillor, is just being much more specific in the fact of what the funds are actually being provided. That's not a sponsorship, we're actually making a direct contribution, or we'll do a direct acquisition of the platform and the collateral that goes with it, and that'll be done in accordance with our procurement policy, just making that much clearer in .1.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Everyone,
I had some comments, but pretty much in line with what Councillor Inglis said, but the report doesn't actually explain that at all, which you've just included in the recommendation, so you just need to remember that.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. No further comment? We'll now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We move now to item 10.3, 2020-21 Annual Donations Program Recommendations. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Rodder. Second Councillor Rodder, yes?
Yes, I'll second that.
I thought I saw your hand up. Councillor Wilson, would you like to make a comment? Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone wishing to make comment? Being no comment, I put the motion. All those in favour?
Right.
Against? Carried. Now that brings us to item 11, which is reports to be considered in closed council. So at this juncture, the council intends to retire to closed council, and I refer to the members of the public present to at the last page where there's a list of the matters to be considered in the closed council. And I offer the opportunity as members of the public to make any representations as to whether any part of the item listed should not be considered in closed council. Councillor